Look, Jacob, if you didn't learn the topic, you're not going to be able to get it.
Okay, fair enough. It's true.
Look, we're live here.
This is embarrassing.
We're doing it live.
See, but now I'm proving to people that I actually read these.
That's right. Welcome to New Polity, where Jacob virtue signals with his big books. I'll admit straight up, I don't read anything except for title pages and then the little bit where it says who the book's dedicated to. I think that's the best part of any book. It's so beautiful.
It's heartwarming.
I like to buy books just to know that kind of Christian gift is present.
Yeah.
I don't like the rest of it. It's all...
So what about if I dedicated a book to you and just made the entire book the dedication?
That'd be the best book. That'd be the best book. Welcome to
You would read it. Yeah.
New Polity's podcast. We're happy to have you here. We're talking about money. The name of the podcast is Insert Audio here. And we're excited today because apparently Jacob's got some kind of hot take. Spicy, little chicken tikka masala take.
Whoa. Well, I wanted to talk about inheritance.
Inheritance.
But not so much receiving inheritance, but giving inheritance.
Okay.
Which we could start off by saying Saint Basil says is impossible. You can't actually do it. You can't give an inheritance.
Hold up. What does our herbal father mean?
It's impossible because you have died. All of your material possessions have been taken from you.
By the Grim Reaper?
By the Grim Reaper himself.
Yeah.
And so you can't actually give what has been taken. So it's just if I come over and I punch you in the face and I take your nice cardigan off your back,
right.
You'll be like, oh, I give that to you. You're like, no, doesn't count. I took it already.
The joke here being that I did actually get this cardigan from Jacob, namely his grandfather, who, when he passed away, left an inheritance.
Ouch, that hurt, yeah.
An inheritance of a whole box of awesome sweaters.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Soft stuff. You know that scene in Great Gatsby where what's her face is like, oh, Gatsby, you're the man with the beautiful shirts. That's how I think of your grandfather.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
He does. He had some great shirts and everything. But that is ironically, part of the game is that he didn't leave those to anybody, but they got dispersed out. And of course, we're all going to have stuff that gets dispersed out when we all die.
Okay.
But part of the joy of leaving inheritance is, or actually even not even leaving inheritance, but when somebody dies, I'm grieving my godfather who just died. Part of a consolation within death is receiving some things that they had, owned, they used, and I particularly like when those that I love, when I have a chance to have a coat or a jacket, or cardigan from someone that I loved, but that's very different than planning to leave money.
Well, okay, but I'm perturbed by this in a sense because can't you just write down I bequeath this money to my a will, right?
Yeah.
Kid, whatever, when I die.
Well, so I do want to make a proper distinction between, maybe we can say, wealth and riches. This is kind of a distinction that you'd find in a lot of the scholastics, and all this means is real goods versus money.
I see. So you're saying when you're talking about inheritance in the negative sense, what we can't do, you're saying we can't give money after we die? Is that right?
Well, no, this is kind of a funny point that St. Basil makes, is that, and there is a kind of a rhetorical flair to make you think a little bit about the giving versus the taking, it was taken from you. And when it comes to, but here's the thing that you don't find any squabble with, that at least I know of, and welcome to correction on this, that I've never read a father or a scholastic write against leaving wealth, real property, real goods, to his family when he dies. There's nothing about that. It's particular to money,
which makes sense really, because the goods that a family enjoys in a Christian kingdom are already owned within the family. So it is a gift in one sense, but the whole point is that you own them for the use of those closest to you. So
Yeah.
Aquinas talks about this kind of love which buoys up, the people closest to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what they already exist for. If they didn't exist for that, if you're holding them to yourselves,
Yeah.
then the poor and those who needed it more than you would have a claim on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's something also, there has to be some pastoral points in this too, because death is real, it hurts. And so I don't want to injure the name of the dead in in doing any of this or saying any of this. But there's something, if maybe a focus on it like this, is that had I gotten any money from my godfather, it wouldn't be all that special. Money's impersonal. It doesn't have his imprint on it. His sweater's dead. His tie's dead. His chair's dead. And those are memories of seeing him in these things that can be passed down. So, but money, a dime a dozen.
Okay, so I see why there's a real value in diminishing the value of money in terms of inheritance. But it sounded like what Basil was saying is that you can't give money.
Yeah. So, and again, I'll just reiterate, it's a little bit of a rhetorical point, because of course, you can design where your wealth goes and such, but of course, hopefully it's, you were using you at one point translated money into real goods in your life. And you use those real goods to bless your family and your friends. And now in your death, they continue to bless your family and your friends. Money, however, that you did not spend, never blessed your family or your friends.
I see. Yeah.
It never got translated into real goods. You might say that maybe there was some security that it provided them, that it was that there was some psychological, gift that afforded them. And maybe that's real, but then, Christ is going to come over your shoulder and say, yeah, you made them depend on this money rather than on me. And you don't want Christ to come over your shoulder and do that, which he does every single time he has an opportunity in the Gospels. Like there's no excuse for it really. And that's something hard that we kind of have to face up to, all of us. But when you set aside that non-Christian objection, you are left with this impersonal void of goods, which is money.
Which potentially could be anything.
Which could potentially be anything. So there's a few different things to kind of talk about with the inheritance, but I really think that St. Augustine, who's preached many sermons on inheritance, needs to be listened to.
Okay.
And his point is hard to hear probably for some, but his reasoning is pretty strong and it's worth a listen.
Okay.
So I'm pulling from sermon. No, some of his sermon numbers get confused, like tossed around a little bit, but sermon 9, 15, and then in his number 6 from his on the Sermon of the Mount.
Okay.
So if you want to go through those, I'm just going to reference them. But his argument first, he's a fiery preacher, good guy. He is going right at the jugular of the rich who say that they are saving their money and they have a savings account. Yeah. And he's saying, Well, why are you saving that? Why are you saving that money? If you have this just for an insurance purposes, as it were, then which you claim as insurance. Now he'll make some distinctions, but if you claim as insurance, you're not really ever going to use that for yourself. Who is going to use that money? Well, it's going to be the person that breaks into your home and steals it from you. So he says, first of all, you're saving for thieves, which is not a good thing to do. You should not benefit those sinners. Then he's playing kind of a give and take. It's a dialogue even within these homilies. You say, well, no. I'm actually not saving for it never to be used. I'm saving for it to be for my son. And he actually, St. Augustine makes this dialogue in multiple sermons, and he has different responses to this fictitious interlocutor, And the first one is, oh, really, for your son? That's right. That's very nice. Well, your son's dead. He just died. What are you going to do with the money now? And that's, really tough. Here it's like, okay, your son's dead. There's nobody to inherit your wealth. There's nobody that you're storing up for. Now you're actually faced with your real motives. Why are you actually saving that money? If it was genuinely for your son, then spend it. Make sure and as the church has always said in their teaching, if you have excessive money, it is not up to you what you do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So you spend it well. You don't blow it on Vegas. That was somewhere in the homily. I can't remember.
Yeah.
So that's a really tough first point. It's
Yeah,
just like
totally.
actually facing up to yourself about why you're actually saving this money. But then in a different homily, he says that, again, well, no, I'm saving this money as inheritance for my son. Okay, you die. Your son gets the money in this case. Son doesn't die in this case. Son gets the money, and he doesn't spend it. And he saves it for his entire life. And then he dies and gives it as an inheritance to his kid. And then that happens again. And then it happens again. And then the money never gets spent. This is a sin, he says. And it's clearly a material sin when it passes through all these ages, when people really do need help. And people really do need help.
Mm.
And if you're a rich person out there and you don't think people really need help, you need to get outside your bubble. People really need help. They really need to be buoyed up with that excessive cash. So these are these two first responses that you find. St. John Chrysostom, I'll add him to this little litany, wags his finger at anybody who buries his money. That he has put the money back in the mine, the gold and the silver back in the mine, and this material hoarding, and hoarding's an interesting thing because there's a lot of people out there, like primarily I know this from the Austrian school, say that hoarding cannot actually exist because price levels will mediate themselves out, which is a clever way of justifying sin, I just think. And but he says that this is the problem, is that if you put the money back in the mine, then you are burying it. You are putting it to death. I mean, it sounds reminiscent of the parable of talents in this way. You're putting it to death, and in so doing others as well.
Wow.
So this is the patristic case on inheritance.
Wow.
That it is actually you failing to merit in the way that you should,
Mm-hmm.
that it is putting and training your children to put their own souls at jeopardy in the same way that you have. And it is ultimately inappropriate, ineffectual. And this point is another Saint Gregory the Great point, as well as a Saint Basil point. Impossible to merit from money that is given out to charitable causes after you're dead, because then it's taken from you.
Right.
There has to be some separation from your idol,
Right.
and some real risk,
Mm-hmm.
which builds virtue.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my case.
Okay.
It's not really my case, though. It's really the church father's case.
Well, it's fairly strong, but I wonder, like, what you would say to someone who says, "Okay, I want to give my kid $1,000 after I die,"
Mm-hmm.
and who, in not spending it, sees that as the separation. So, like, in the sense of, I'm not going to use this, and that's a sacrifice.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I now am worth less in a certain respect, and I'm going to put it aside for my son. Doesn't that get over at least that last complaint that you didn't give it because you were dead? It was taken from you. Like, if you, by putting it away, don't you sort of negate its use for you, and so do a kind of gift?
So I'm going to use another kind of scholastic technique here, where I'm not going to analyze the act, but rather the motivations behind it.
Okay.
Why wouldn't you just give it to him while you're alive?
Well, I was gonna say, well, maybe he's really young and couldn't use it yet, but then why not give it to him when he's 15 or something like that?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that is a great question. I guess the only all right. So then I'm gonna reach a little farther out. Why do people give inheritances? Um, I I guess the idea is something like this, something like death of a father who's providing for
Mhm.
his children is it creates a difficulty for them.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, funeral costs, say,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then potentially some immediate, um, your lack of a, I don't know, whatever he was to them, source of gifts, a source of perhaps loans,
Yeah.
um, and so the inheritance is a preemptive like help
Mhm.
against the problems that death can cause
Right.
for your family. Is that
Absolutely, yeah. No, and it's a big reason why insurance companies make millions off of life insurance.
well, life insurance is weird because it's almost like a that I don't know if we could lump life insurance and inheritance together in
Well,
this.
in that regard, you could,
Yeah.
because life insurance is particularly for those you leave behind.
Yeah.
You know, like the reason why you might not pay into life insurance is because you hate the capitalist superstructure and you'd rather just save money for when these issues of post-mortem inevitably arise for your family, or not necessarily inevitably arise.
Sure.
And I think that's part of the answer that some scholastics would give, and they might say something like, well, certainly there's a difference between, you know, $1,000 for leaving behind $1,000 for your burial, or $2,000. I mean, it's just a racket how expensive
Yeah,
that
I
stuff
know.
is. I mean, really.
Put a person in the ground. You got to like deal with a union to do it.
It's unbelievable, yeah. And so that's a real thing, and I can understand that. There's also another thing, you know, like we have young families, and making sure that they can actually have a little bit of breathing room as at that time as well. But this gets to, and so there's maybe it's I have not been totally converted to the church fathers yet, and that's why I keep citing them instead of making this argument myself. So I think there's probably some room in here um, for these understandings, but when you're dealing with, they're probably thinking, and I don't know about this, we can wind it back a little bit, but they're probably thinking about, you know, huge gifts,
Oh, totally.
you know, $100,000 or above,
Yeah. No,
depending on how you live.
I'm playing the devil's advocate in a hard way because like I don't think that anyone would describe money left behind to pay for funeral expenses as an inheritance.
No, I don't think
because the whole
that's
point
right.
is
Yeah.
like it's to be spent on an immediate expense.
Yes.
Whereas inheritance, I mean, think about the warmth of that word, inheritance. I'm going to inherit.
Yeah.
My aunt just died. Hooray! I'm going to inherit $1 million. Right? This is like the dream that I've had. Not for my particular aunt who I love, but you know what I mean. Like you have this sort of idea that a wealthy lost, relative is going to die, and then you're going to inherit a large sum of money, and it's
Yeah.
not to pay for his funeral. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. That's the biggest
It's
funeral
to
of all
buy
time.
a boat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm with you. So I
Yeah.
actually think the case holds. It's just that you might make a distinction, and even then, the distinction would be a little dubious because it'd be like, well, then why not? Why not spend the money such that your family had the kind of productive property already that they
Well,
could?
that's really what it
Okay.
comes down to, is that if we leave behind our families tomorrow, well, there's a couple different things that should happen in the most personal sense, is that you take care of my family, I take care of your family, you
Mhm.
know, and
Yeah, leave the inheritance of friends.
yeah, exactly. I mean, there's something so much richer about it, more stable, and actually, if you're talking about any of that psychological surety, is that actually raising your family up in order to inherit your wealth, not your riches, like your productive property. That can be a company, that can be
Yeah.
land, it can be whatever the source of your income is, um, and then also leaving them the friends that will care for them and to uh, they're not completely helpless, but will enable that
Man,
through that time too.
I love this. You're warming me up.
Mhm.
I didn't believe you at first, but now I'm thinking like, whoa, what a weird alienated world.
Yeah.
If the way that you're living is to pass on money
Yes.
to your kids when you die as their means of living further in the world, it's like this weird assumption that there is no community.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
it's totally like
Well, that's
y-
always the point of money at the beginning, is that if you go back to a tribal clannish society, you don't you always depend on George down the street to provide you with the food that you
it's
need.
George in every clan.
It's always yours. It's like Girgos. Actually,
Yeah.
George is the farmer in Greek, like
Is it?
the wine, the tiller. So when Jesus
Oh, I
talks
thought you were
about
talking about the guy that does euros in our town. He's also
well,
George.
I love that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, George is the man. Anyways, getting off on too big of a tangent, but it's a fitting name
Yeah.
for somebody in a clannish society.
Yeah,
That's all I'm
totally.
saying.
Okay, George. So there's
And you always depend on George, but the very moment you have money, you
Yep.
depend on the money instead of George. And all of a sudden your community becomes a little less personal.
yeah, because
where-
you're still depending on others, but now you're operating them. Like the money is an incentive for them to act. So they're not acting on the basis of the personal relationship. They're acting
Yes.
on the basis of the individual desire.
Yeah, love for money instead of love for person.
Right, right.
at
So you
that
can
point.
still say, okay, we're still related, and what's his name? Who's that capitalist apostle guy? Friedman.
Oh, Milton Friedman.
Yeah, Milton Friedman has this whole bit on like how like war and enmity is all overcome by the market mechanism because we
dude.
all participate together in producing a pencil.
Well, that was.
Uh, you know what I mean? Like
I
have you
love
seen
that
this one?
pencil thing. I think it's the funniest video. You guys got to see this. Was it the creation of the pencil?
Yeah.
But he says, he like shows this crazy pencil and like all the different parts like come from all over the world, and because all these different places in the world are participating together for the great teleology of the construction of a pencil, they will not go to war with one another.
Yeah.
And of course, that's a point that Adam Smith makes in The Wealth of Nations
Yeah,
too. But
yeah.
where the etiquette of business cooperation becomes a mechanism of peace.
And we've seen that work really well, I would say,
Yeah.
in our last 300 years
Yeah,
of having business ethics replace the gospels. Oh, Jacob, you did it again. I'm sad. I'm like, it's like, okay. Let's move on. No.
Kill
Oh, if
people
you could
for
replace the
resources.
gospels, you could, like business etiquette. That's so insightful. That's exactly what's happened. Like nations are all just like,
Well, they said that's what they were doing,
Yeah,
and
just like-
even at one point in jurisprudence, but especially in Wealth of Nations before, where he actually bemoans this fact, but I think it's going to be best.
if we're all just like stupid shopkeepers, like
Yeah.
daintily dealing with each other to make the most money that we possibly
Yeah.
can.
Yep, it's crazy. So, anyways, George gets.
I want to die. I am excited to die. I'll be honest.
Yeah, well, that's
Pray for me.
yeah, I will. Don't leave an inheritance when you do.
I won't.
Anyways,
I think I
This-
might. I'm going to think about it, but it's
Yeah.
very convicting. Keep going on it.
No, it's tough. It's tough, and I mean, especially it's hard for me with a family and such. And one thing that I guess I should, maybe I shouldn't say this. I'm gonna say it anyway.
Oh boy, these moments are always fun for me. I have no idea what's going to come.
For now, and I might change my mind on this. For now, we always save 6 months of living in case something goes bad. I save this money though, not just for our family, but for anybody in our community. So there's been a number of occasions where I've just, I think of it as our city savings account. So I always save that money, and if people need it, then I'll write them a check and give it away. Then we'll try and save up a little bit more so that Marc's there. And eventually that would be for my family and for any of those who are taking care of them. But anyways, that's what we do for now, and I not sure how long I can justify that, but I think there's
right, but there's
some reason to
something
it.
there's something
Yeah.
pilgrimage about all this, in the sense of like it would be the sign of a failed community if a father who dies and provides his family with 6 months of living,
Mhm.
we're not thereafter taken care of in whatever way that means.
Oh, absolutely. No, I think
So
the
it's
biggest
like we're trying to rebuild communities within the ruins. Like it's been destroyed. Most people don't have this kind of friendship
yeah.
to be able to say no to things like inheritance, to say
Yeah.
thanks but no thanks to that false idea of security.
No, but I know like if I die tomorrow, you know, Alice and Blaze are going to be very well taken care of by you, by Andrew, by Alex, by everybody in our
A lot of Alexes.
there's a lot of Alexes.
Yeah.
But just even by the Ashes, by all our neighbors, we have such unbelievable. I mean, the English would be there. I mean, it's just we are spoiled with the riches of real self-giving friendships, and that is an inheritance that really takes time to develop, to cultivate, and is a bigger gift than you could ever really know.
Yeah,
So
and there is a way in which you're right. You started this particular line of the discussion talking about how money is what allows us to not need those things, or at least
Mhm.
that's the myth.
Mhm.
The accumulation of money actually always oppresses someone because it's not being used, right? So
Yeah,
like you don't
yeah.
necessarily see them or get to know them, but there is a loss that happens when you
Yeah.
accumulate without spending. But for those whom it doesn't negatively affect, right, who just have the large savings account, this what was I saying? Oh, this money appears as a replacement for community. Like you don't
Yeah.
need it. And then the other thing that happens perversely is that people also don't feel obligated to give it, to give charity, to give help, aid. I mean, if I'm like,
Yeah, this is a really
if
important
I'm like,
part.
I know Jacob, he's leaving, $50,000 to his kid when he dies, and then Jacob dies.
Man, you think we live well for 6 months?
This is a theoretical. I already know that you're not because you just told me. But if that were the case, I certainly, for one, would not be like check in on Blaze. I mean, I would, but and this is what we actually do in society, right?
Yeah.
Like the way we check in on people now is like a purely emotional situation. It's like there's 4 or 5 days surrounding a funeral in which everyone says to you like, "Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss," and what we don't have is a natural knee-jerk response of like, how do we incorporate you within new economies because you've
Yeah.
lost a kind of part of your economy.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's gone. And it makes
Yeah.
sense that inheritance, while it's not the only thing, obviously, would help us to abstract ourselves from the need for incorporating grieving widows and orphans
Yep.
into new economies.
Yep. So like true religion, as St. James calls that,
True religion.
is gone. It like literally disappears with techniques such as inheritance and life insurance.
Wow. You brought up life insurance.
But I really do think that they end up going in a similar hat.
Well, no, sure. I mean, on a social level, that's obvious.
Yeah.
Like literally, we all assume that you get a packet of money when someone you love dies.
Yeah, and there is something. Life insurance speaks something more like, I need the help, whereas just connotatively, insurance is or inheritance is.
Yes.
I got something to blow.
No, and I think that's a really good. We talk about this all the time when we're trying to develop a post-liberal understanding of scriptures. And one of the things we talk about is the difference between real scarcity and then a presumption of scarcity. And it's really all the difference in the world, which is when you presume that creation is not good. So when that's your baseline assumption, then your actions become orientated towards trying to be a new god of a new world. So you try to amass wealth to secure yourself against a creation that you think is opposed essentially to your own interest, your own good. That is, I think, what Adam and Eve did under the tree, and it's what we continue to do, is look at God's good creation with his good plan for how we are going to be taken care of. I mean, it's important to realize, like, people think sometimes of like the Garden of Eden of perfection as this like place where there's no weakness or care, which is ridiculous. Read Aquinas, like there are children, right? We were going to have children and they can't walk. Like the difference is that's a real scarcity. If you want to say like there's a real instance which by nature this person needs help. It's not the same as saying like I think that my friends will probably try to take advantage of me, and the people I know want to hurt me. And so I need to amass as much money as possible to be able to buy as much land to be able to separate myself. I mean, like that's the difference. And I
Mm-hmm.
think somewhere in the life insurance inheritance distinction, and I don't think it's as good as this, but there is that distinction, right? Like the real scarcity of death.
Mm-hmm.
Death hurts and it causes a real problem
Yeah.
is very different than this totally aimless, like we need security, like you just need power,
Yeah,
basically.
but I mean, insurance is a tough one. We'll do a different kind of conversation. We'll do a different conversation on insurance.
Yeah.
But there is a scholastic tradition that insurance was just gambling, and
Yeah.
you're not allowed to do that.
Oh.
And then there was, some early Jesuits who tried to make the distinction that when you go over with a boatload of goods as a merchant to the next, city over, and there's a tempest and it all goes away, then, well, you've really hurt the livelihoods of so many people. And so it was likely to happen. Um, it wasn't just like, well, we never know if this is going to happen, but it's like, no, there's a 50-50, 60-40 chance that boat's going to tip over,
Yeah.
which I just, anyways,
I would never
maybe
get in
in certain seasons, I don't know, but
I wouldn't get in a boat on those odds, that's for sure.
yeah, no kidding. Anyways, we'll talk about that at a different point, but I think that insurance even falls under the general critique of like we have failed to cultivate cities of love, and that and part of that cultivation, it actually demands people stepping up in a real way of giving away the money that they are saving, justifying to themselves that it is inheritance, or even having a mistaken understanding of what inheritance is. And if you are genuinely worried about your kids, spend the money now on some real productive property. Create a business. Make sure that they're raised in such a way as that they love you, want to work with you, and that they are inspired by their city to want to be here, and not to go far, as the saying goes. Oh, kid, you're going far.
Yeah.
You said that in a speech once, Mark. I love that. Yeah, but rather want to stay and to be able to continue this cultivation of love that they were cultivated in.
Anecdotally, I have never met someone who was given a big inheritance that didn't suffer from it. And what I mean is they were immediately placed in a situation of huge temptation.
Yeah.
I mean, especially when it was someone they really loved, because then they have to experience at one and the same time the loss of a real good and then the gain of a massive potential good.
Dude.
And that's your experience of funeral, is becoming rich. And I think that is actually, I think that's bad, or at least it's very, very difficult. And not just emotionally, but like in then saying that I am going to use this money well.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this is the other problem, is that, I mean, if you meet anyone who's dealing with a large inheritance, they're like, if it's not something on their back that they're trying to work through, it's a real temptation towards a life without work.
I just met a really interesting person a couple months ago. Her dad died and she inherited an extraordinary amount of money. And she doesn't own a home. She doesn't live anywhere. She's out of a suitcase and has been for years now, since he's died. And that just speaks it actually is a perfect juxtaposition between inheriting or living in the society that your father raised you in, where people are known, where the locality matters because that was your source of stability, versus the life of inheritance where you don't know anybody except for money, and so you don't stay anywhere because there's nowhere to stay, in a real sense.
Yeah.
That's depressing. It's Christmas. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Look, you guys asked for it. You didn't ask for it. We just did this to you. I mean, you try to do a podcast on money and keep it positive, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
Jesus tried that and he did not manage it. So I don't think that we are going to be able to succeed where our Lord failed.
Yeah.
I'm just saying he gets worked up about money, and it's not like there's a rosy ending to most
Yeah.
of those particular parables.
Yeah.
You'll notice that the kind of crucial money text where Jesus says to not store up, but to says to the rich man to give away what you own, and then you'll have treasure in heaven. How does the rich man leave?
Very sad.
Very sad. And so, with that,
No, but honestly, I mean, maybe take this to a if somebody is out there who is very rich, don't move away from this quickly. Don't move away very angrily either, I hope, because that will suppress your ability to think well about this and to pray well about this. And even sadness, St. Thomas says, is an emotion that people should feel when there's an inability to do otherwise. You know, if you are, working on your car and your engine dies and you are a mechanic that knows what to do, you get mad because there's something to change, that you know how to change it. But if you don't know how to do that, you get very anxious and unsettled. And if, there's, we need another example now, but if there's another example in which there's just a situation, there's nothing to do about it. I mean, this is what happens when real tragedy strikes and we think of people dead and there's just nothing that you can't undo death. Is just sadness. That's appropriate because there can't be anything that's changed. But that rich man who went away, he had sadness because he thought that there was nothing that could be changed.
Right.
But there can be, and that is what Christ offers all of us in the sacraments, is the grace that our souls can be changed, can be made more Christian, can be more Christ-like. So if you think what we're saying is insane,
get mad.
Get mad.
Yeah, I mean, like it follows, right? So
yeah,
anger would be a better response because then.
But consider it. Don't move away from it too quickly.
Yeah. And as always, you can just message us with any questions on inheritance or anything else. I'm Marc at newpolity.com. Jacob, you can email him at jacob@newpolity.com, and we'll do our best to address them. So,
thanks.
Pox.